might say, why is it that African leaders haven't done anything about this deplorable situation? Well, let me tell you, my brother and sister, they have tried.
Welcome back to Brain Media, your #1 source for in-depth discussions on African politics, economics, and international relations. Today, we're diving into one of the most significant geopolitical shifts happening in Francophone Africa, the Alliance of Sahel States, comprising Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, has taken a historic step by withdrawing from the International Organization of Francophonie, also known as the OEF. This is a decision that has sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles, as these three countries were founding members of the organization. Their departure signals not just dissatisfaction with the OEF, but a broader rejection of French-led institutions and a growing push for African sovereignty. The OEF, founded in 1970 in Niamey, Niger, was originally created to promote the French language and culture in its member states while fostering international cooperation. However, for Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, the organization has become a tool of political manipulation, disproportionately targeting African nations. While ignoring governance crises in other parts of the world, their decision to leave is not just about the OEF. It's about restructuring Africa's political and economic landscape, breaking free from the influence of former colonial powers, and forging a new path toward true independence. What does this withdrawal mean for Francophone Africa? Could this be the first domino to fall, leading other African nations to question their ties to France? And what impact will this have on the broader geopolitical landscape? Stay with us as we unpack the full story, from the historical roots of Francophone influence in Africa to the potential future consequences of this monumental decision. Let's begin by understanding why Niger was the first to take this bold step. To fully grasp the significance of these withdrawals, we must first examine the events that led to them. Niger was the first country to announce its departure from the OEF in January 2025. This decision was part of a larger political transformation occurring in the country, especially after the military coup that took place in July 2023, overthrowing President Mohamed Bazoum. The new government in Niamey quickly moved to redefine Niger's foreign relations, particularly with France. One of the first major moves by Niger's new military leadership was to cut ties with France when it came to defense. They ended long-standing agreements and ordered French troops to leave the country. For years, France had maintained a military presence in Niger, justifying it as part of a counterterrorism effort in the Sahel. But for Niger's new government, this wasn't just about security, it was about sovereignty. They saw the continued presence of French forces as an overreach, a sign that Niger wasn't truly in control of its own affairs. So, they made a decisive break, signaling that the country was ready to take a new direction, free from French influence. But this wasn't just about military independence. It was also about political and economic autonomy. The International Organization of Francophonie, or OEF, was originally established to promote French language and culture while fostering international cooperation. However, Niger's leadership began to see it as something else, a tool of Western political control, one that no longer served their country's interests. When the OAF suspended Niger's membership, following the 2023 coup, it was seen as a clear double standard. Why, they asked, were African nations consistently punished for political transitions, while other countries with similar governance issues were ignored? By January 2025, Niger had had enough. The government made it clear it would no longer be part of an institution that didn't respect its sovereignty. And once Niger set that precedent, it wasn't long before other countries followed suit. Just weeks after Niger's withdrawal, Burkina Faso made a similar announcement. On February 28, 2025, their reasoning? Nearly identical. The government in Ouagadougou stated that the OAF had become a biased institution, one that was more interested in serving Western political interests than actually promoting cooperation among its member states. They pointed out that African nations were being suspended and penalized, while governance issues in other regions of the world were ignored. To them, this was proof that the OIF was being used as a political weapon rather than a fair and neutral organization. This decision wasn't out of the blue. Burkina Faso had already been distancing itself from France for months. They had expelled French troops, ended military agreements, and started forming new alliances, particularly with Russia. Leaving the OEF was just the next step in a much bigger push for independence from French influence. Then, on March 18, 2025, Mali and Burkina Faso made public their decisions to officially exit the organization. The Malian Ministry of Foreign Affairs released a statement confirming that they, too, were withdrawing from the OEF. For Mali, this decision had been a long time coming. Since the country's 2021 military coup, its relationship with the OEF had been strained. Like Niger and Burkina Faso, Mali's government saw the OIF's suspension of its membership as unfair and hypocritical. If other countries in the world were experiencing political instability, but weren't facing the same consequences, why should African nations be treated differently? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Now, let's continue. With all three countries now out of the OEF, the question arises, is this just the beginning of a larger movement? Could other Francophone African nations follow their lead and distance themselves from French-led institutions? The withdrawal of Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali from the OEF is part of a broader trend of Francophone African nations reassessing their relationships with France. For decades, France has maintained strong political, military, and economic ties with its former colonies. However, these relationships have increasingly come under scrutiny, as many African nations feel that French influence has been more of a hindrance than a benefit. One of the most contentious issues has been the continued use of the CFA franc, a currency that is pegged to the euro and controlled in part by the French treasury. Critics argue that this system gives France undue control over the economies of West and Central African countries, preventing true economic independence. In recent years, there have been growing calls for Francophone nations to abandon the CFA franc in favor of their own currencies, and some countries have already begun taking steps in that direction. Beyond economic concerns, there has also been increasing frustration with France's military presence in Africa. While French forces have played a role in counterterrorism operations, many Africans view their presence as a continuation of colonial-era control. The expulsion of French troops from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger is a clear indication that these governments no longer see France as a necessary security partner. Instead, they have been seeking alternative alliances, particularly with Russia, which has been expanding its influence in Africa through military and economic cooperation. With all three countries now out of the OEF, it's clear that this isn't just about one organization. It's part of a much bigger shift. The message from Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali is loud and clear. They are done with institutions they see as extensions of French control. And now, the question is, will other African nations follow their lead? The formation of the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, is another key development in this shift. Away from France, this regional bloc, made up of Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, aims to foster stronger economic and security cooperation among its members, reducing their reliance on external actors. The withdrawal from the OEF is just one step in a larger strategy to build an independent regional identity that is free from Western interference. The question now is whether this trend will continue beyond the EES countries. Could other Francophone African nations also choose to exit the OEF and other French-led institutions? Countries like Guinea, Chad, and even Senegal have seen growing debates about their relationships with France. If the movement gains momentum, it could lead to a significant reconfiguration of political alliances in Africa. At the same time, France is facing increasing pressure to redefine its role in the region. With its influence waning, French policymakers will need to decide whether to take a more cooperative approach with African nations or risk further alienation. The loss of three founding OIF members is a major blow to the organization's credibility. And if other countries begin questioning their membership, the OIF could face a legitimacy crisis. The withdrawal of Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali from the OIF is not just a symbolic act, it is a statement. A statement that Francophone Africa is no longer willing to accept the status quo. This is a defining moment for the future of African sovereignty and independence. What do you think? Will other African nations follow? Is the OIF doomed? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates on African politics. This is Brain Media, keeping you informed on the biggest shifts in Africa's political landscape. See you in the next one.